over the course of the next hour or so nationally. Mike, talk to me a little bit about some of the surprises we've seen. Nobody really predicted the path that this was going to take tonight.
Sure, it has been very surprising. I think Hillary Clinton was counting on the Rust Belt to win those, and those are the ones that are up for grabs right now: Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Michigan. And, we have yet to see what is actually going to happen. It is possible that Hillary Clinton could end up winning the popular vote and Donald Trump win the electoral vote. That is a possibility. That would be a surprise. We've had that happen 4 times in our history in the past. So that's one of the quirks of our system and the Electoral College. I think it's been surprising in that there's been a very strong message of vote against the establishment, voting against the elite. We got hints of that during the primaries with Bernie Sanders and Donald Trump both running as populists from different ends of the spectrum, and that was part of what it was. You had Donald Trump campaigning using a lot of Richard Nixon terminology, the law and order, the bringing out the silent majority. And in fact, that has been one of the things that I think maybe has surprised pollsters, that perhaps there were some folks that were not covered by the polls, the silent majority, the white voters in some of these states that Trump has brought out.
And we've all made this observation, and it's very interesting to see both nationally, locally, statewide, in many states, in many regions around the country. We've really got a situation now where I think it's just been brought into very sharp relief tonight, where we have city versus rural, coasts versus middle. It's true in Washington State, it's true nationally, it's true in Florida and Michigan and Detroit and a lot of these other kinds of places. What does that say about the electorate and who came out to vote? Who made this happen? You talked about a silent majority. This is an open skate here. Who has a thought about that?
Well, I think the cities versus the rural area, they have very different sets of needs. And sometimes I don't think they acknowledge what those needs are that the other has. And that's why we have a lot of tension and a lot of division, I think, in the country.
And Brian, this has been a complaint in the state of Washington for a long time. Back when I was working in Yakima, I remember my news director told me the only thing we have in common with people on the west side is license plates. and King County is blue and everybody else is red. Generally speaking, here in Washington State. What's your take on this?
Well, I think what we're really seeing is this this previously untapped unrest. And it's national, and it's an example of where government historically doesn't do a very good job of listening, and people are tired of it. They had a place to go express that this time, and they don't always, because usually the choice is between this kind of establishment candidate or that establishment candidate. Clearly there was only one establishment candidate in this race.
Is that part of the problem? Let's talk about the Democratic Party. Has there been a gentrification of the Democratic Party? Have they walked away from their traditional blue-collar working man or woman base? Your thoughts about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that is certainly a possibility. I think that we have to kind of stop and evaluate whether or not what we're witnessing in this election really represents a trend toward any sort of politics in the future. So whether it represents a long-term problem between the rural-urban divide, whether it represents racial hostility or things like that. I think that this election is very unique. Donald Trump is a very unique candidate. And so before looking at the data, I would caution everybody not to make too many predictions about what this means for elections moving forward.
I think this was brought up in our discussion over in the green rooms. The timing of things like the premium increases for Obamacare could have proven to be very pivotal. What do you think about that and the timing of some of those things?
I think there was a lot of timing issues. There was that. There was the FBI director's letters. And when we're dealing with such small margins of voters, things like that can make a significant difference. And it appears that they may have.
One of the other major differences that if you listen to people talk about making this decision, I was surprised a lot by how many people focused on the Supreme Court, saying, you know, no matter how you feel about candidate A or candidate B, really it's the shape of the court that you want to be thinking about over the long term. Brian, I see you nodding your head over there a little bit. Does that back up what you heard anecdotally at all? Or?
Yeah, quite a bit. Certainly nationally, I think there were a lot of people who would hold that discussion, that whether you like Secretary Clinton or not, whether you like Donald Trump or not, the winner is going to have the ability to appoint at least a couple of Supreme Court justices before too long. And that's long-lasting. That's significant. Certainly we saw that kind of issue here in the state of Washington as well, where there was a very concerted effort to run against 3 incumbent state Supreme Court justices. Those were not effective at all, but at least I think they probably did raise the visibility of those races, but the 3 current incumbents on the Supreme Court won easily.
Michael, I think your admonition not to read too much into this too soon and to come to these grand meta themes that we all like to about the nature of this country and the electorate is well taken. With that said, let's go ahead and do that. A little bit here about this unprecedented nature of Donald Trump's campaign, and Mike, you mentioned this as well. He did everything wrong, according to the experts, and yet this still worked for him. I know, Mike, maybe I'll start with you. You actually have kind of a laundry list you can check off of things, all the things that weren't supposed to work.
Yeah, so starting with Donald Trump's rhetoric, which offended major constituencies. Donald Trump was behind in fundraising. He was behind in number of paid staff, number of field offices, number of newspaper endorsements. You had newspapers who had not endorsed a Democratic candidate for over 100 years, or who had never done it since their founding in 1868. I mean, just incredible. Out of the top 100 newspapers in the country, Trump got 1 endorsement, and Clinton picked up the rest. So lots and lots of unprecedented things. And as you said, he did everything wrong, and yet somehow he struck a responsive chord with a large segment of the population.
So what do you tell your students, Michael, when you say, well, you shouldn't do this, and you shouldn't do this, and they go, it doesn't matter, look at Donald Trump. What are you going to say now?
that it still matters, that it matters in my classroom at least, that civility still matters. And I think that one of the reasons why I caution against drawing too many conclusions from this is because I think all of those things that Mike lists are still things that are important. And important in winning an election. Donald Trump is a very unique candidate. Most candidates don't start the election cycle with 100% name recognition. They haven't had their own reality television shows. They haven't published books. And so he was a unique figure, and he didn't need all of those other things necessarily. And so I think that for future candidates, I don't know that they could chart the same course and end up with the same results.
Lastly, we have about 30 seconds for this one. Brian, you have a reputation for being an advocate for open government. What about the anger level in this whole thing? We have an angry candidate, at least one, and an angry electorate, and it's resulted in major change.
Now, I think it is at least partly, at least in part, reflective of the lack of transparency that especially the federal government has right now. I think it's something that people expect, demand, and deserve is an open government.
All right, thanks so much. Great comments tonight. This is our last election night break here on KBTC. Penelope Keith's Hidden Villages is next if you're looking for a place to live. Thanks for joining us here on KBTC Public Television.